And let me just say, we all agree that this is, we need action on this. But I also think it's important when we talk about the funding that's there, okay? And really, I just want to think about this for 1 second. SSA has a $2 billion a year IT budget. That is a massive amount of spending. I mean, that's like, I probably want to find out on the number of customers you serve or people that you serve on a per capita basis. How is that $2 billion spent compared to, say, something in the private sector? I mean, that's a massive. That's a massive budget. And then also, I think it's important to recognize that the administration got a $784 billion bump above FY22 spending. And at the same time, the case levels are going down, as was highlighted by the gentleman from Florida. So I'm until SSA can provide some clarity on where they're spending their money, how they're spending their money, and the fact I am flat over hearing that the problem during the pandemic is still hanging on. We have to move past that. That can no longer be an excuse for any part of this federal government. We've got to find a way to be innovative and get past it. We do it in our private businesses. We can no longer use that as an excuse. The world has moved on from that. I understand that it had an impact, but I will tell you this, I think, and I'm not trying to beat up on you because as you have said, some of these budgeting items are way above your head. But when you got a $2 billion budget and we're several years past the pandemic and you got a declining caseload, and ultimately there's a massive failure to implement new technology, I just think before you come ask for a bunch more money, you got to be held accountable. We just need answers on how this massive budget is being spent and why it's not being spent efficiently. Because, again, if we can have a plan and we can know how to do this, then we can probably come to an agreement on how we best spend that money. But we can't just keep wasting money. With that, I'll climb down off of my soapbox now, and I will now yield time to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Kustoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. Mr. Camp and Ms. Burdick, to both of you, we've talked about reconsideration. You all have talked about that in your comments. And Ms. Burdick, you as a practitioner. So, Mr. Camp, thinking things through, let's assume it's just eliminated, and obviously that takes care of the additional time. So then what? What process, if any, or what procedure, or what next step would you suggest, or would it just end there after the decision?
Social Security ran a pilot for 20 years in 10 states to see what that would look like, and then ended it a few years ago, and gradually in state by state, there is now new data for what it looks like to add reconsideration back in. The results of that pilot, the state by state assessment, what happened to the number of days, what happened to the other parts of the process, we don't have it. They haven't shown us the data. We don't have an answer after a 20-year pilot for this idea that Social Security has floated since 1984 and that we're discussing today. There must be data and an answer. And then your question is addressed.
Right, and you don't have the data. The data doesn't exist. So, Ms. Burdick, from the practitioner, and you gave some real-world examples in your opening testimony, you recommend the elimination of it.
Absolutely, and the Social Security Task Force does as well.
The people that you represent that come before an ALJ, what have you, do you think you could explain to them that process is eliminated and that's for their betterment?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I was from a prototype state, so I had to explain to them after years and years that no, please appeal 2 times before we see a judge, which is a lot. But I think for most people, What makes sense, what is intuitive, is I do one paper application, and then if I'm denied, then I go to a judge. Having two doesn't really make sense. And it's easier for practitioners to get involved. I am one of a minority of attorneys that get involved at the initial and recon level because there isn't a hearing. There isn't an opportunity to advocate. You're just sending in paper. So I think it'll improve the system. But to your other question, there are other process recommendations, and I know I put them in my testimony, I think some other people, that could also be implemented at the initial level that would additionally, I think, help with the wait time and make things more efficient.
I probably shouldn't ask this, but I will. As a practitioner, what's your opinion of the ALJs that you appear before?
As a practitioner, I think many of the ALJs I appear before are fair. Obviously everything varies, but many of them spend hours reviewing claims. Often when I show up, they are familiar with the issues at hand and have good questions for the claimants about how these things affect their daily lives.
Okay. Thank you I appreciate the answer. If I could, to the acting deputy commissioner, and I want to follow up on something Chairman Ferguson talked about in terms of the money that's been appropriated for IT. Chairman Ferguson gave the figure of $2 billion. That's an accurate figure, isn't it? As far as you know.
As far as I know, I'd have to confirm that, though.
And over the last 10 years, according to data that I've got, the Social Security Administration has spent over $18 billion on IT. Do you know, is that number correct?
I do not know off the top of my head.
As a layman, $18 billion over 10 years for IT seems like a lot, even for an agency of your size, and we still have these issues. I do want to go to your written testimony when you talked about the challenges that you have and the DDSs have in terms of hiring and retention. And I do not want to sound insensitive, but I bet almost every employer in my district, in the private sector, small, medium, and large, talks to me about the same issues. They're offering good jobs. They can't get people to come in to apply, or they don't have the number of applicants that they would have pre-pandemic or 5 years ago. I guess what I'm saying is to suggest to you, your agency is no different from any other employer. Everybody's got these challenges. And I think that in terms of hiring and retention, respectfully to you, to any employer, we've got to think in different ways and think outside the box about how we attract applicants and how we retain them.
Yeah.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Next, my colleague and friend, Mr. Evans, great state of Pennsylvania.